Simon, great to see you. Thank you so much for your time. Happy holidays.
Happy holidays to you. Thanks for having me.
This was one I was just so excited because, like when a film, there's the making of a film and then you wrap it, it's ready to go, and then there's that like kind of announcement that it's coming and everything. As soon as this one was announced with everyone attached to it, I was so excited, right? And like it exceeded my expectations. How excited are you for people to finally be able to see it during the holidays now that it's finally going to be out?
Oh, it's incredible to be able to, you sort of start taking it out in little bits and bobs. And we were sitting on the finished film, having done very little testing with it, and never actually with the finished movie. So then you start showing it to people here and there. And you kind of start seeing how it plays, because you know the movie very well, but you don't quite know how certain things that you're so familiar with are actually playing. Like there's several moments in the movie where we had completely forgotten that the joke was actually funny because you just sort of accept it,
Absolutely. What is that script to screen journey like for you as a director of an animated holiday film? Like, what's that like, kind of seeing everything that these incredible writers put together and then actually seeing it come to life on screen? Because I feel like that is always a magical feeling, but I feel like this one, it's even more magical because it's a Christmas film, right?
I mean, of course, it's gradual, right? You sort of start seeing, some things in storyboard, or you start cutting things together in editorial, and then for the first time, you see an actual shot animated in the movie, and you have this, 90-minute movie with one shot in the middle of it, and you go like, "Oh my God, it's so exciting!" And then it's kind of this rolling, progression. But I gotta say, like for Richard, so Richard Curtis and Peter Souter co-wrote the script, and it's based on Richard Curtis's children's books. And it's quite unusual first of all, quite unusual. I was actually there pitching the project to Netflix with Richard. So we developed it early on, and we didn't have a script at that point. It was just the books, right? So we got together and started talking about how we could interweave these storylines because they're all set at a slightly different timeline. And Richard speaks about this as a kind of a unique experience. He adapted, Bridget Jones' Diary and War Horse and some really big movies. And he says the difference here is when you adapt a big book like this, you have to kind of reduce it to its essence and to take things out. And here, the freedom was that the books are quite simple and they're quite small stories, but really, really strong ideas. And we were able to expand on the books. And that collaboration was obviously extremely rewarding for me to be there firsthand, collaborating with a legend like Richard Curtis.
The stories just come together so well of all these families during the holidays. And, there's this cozy feeling, there's this magical feeling. What is that like, balancing that? Because I do think that the coziness and the magical are two different things in this movie. There's really the Christmas magic component where Santa with the gifts and everything. And then it just feels like a warm hug the whole time. So how do you balance the magical component with the cozy component in that Christmas?
So what we set out to do was to make a film that kind of can sit in the canon, the catalog of Richard's films. And what that meant for me was to go and research it and really do a deep dive into what is the sort of secret sauce, if you will, of Love Actually, Four Weddings and a Funeral, Notting Hill, etc. Yesterday. And the first thing I noticed was it's always set in a place that he knows very well and that it feels really authentic, even though there's a slight, hyper or sort of wish fulfillment to it, and the world is slightly seen through cozy glasses sometimes, and then it's the jokes and the dialogue that has an edge to it. So I sort of really dove deep into that, and we set this film in a place called Wellington-on-Sea, which is based on two towns in Suffolk that he knows very well, called Southwold and Walberswick. So for us, the starting point to what you're talking about is make the world feel real, make it feel like it's a place you can visit. So everything's grounded, the characters are grounded, the world's grounded, and because we're coming into the movie through the perspective of Santa, you sort of have these contrasts between the world of Santa and just telling the audience right from the start, Santa comes in and he's real, and he's bringing his ship to shore in the middle of a blizzard, right? So that there's trouble ahead. and then getting into the story through the perspective of these kids and trying to really make it as believable and as real as we can was kind of the balance that we were looking for right from the start.
It's almost like your answers to these questions are perfect segues to my next question. It's almost like you know what I'm going to ask, because I don't want to go into big spoilers because, December 4th, like people a couple of days will be able to see it. But there's a scene in this film where it's kind of like when you're starting to see things kind of like, I wouldn't say unravel, but like you're starting to see a lot of emotions come into play, right? People are being sad and people are being happy. And Santa's narrating this film. And there are like as a line in regards to holidays and Christmas under a microscope, right? And I just love that line. And that line is going to stay with me forever because I've never like that is so true. So I just kind of wanted to talk, like specifically about that, like that kind of scene in the film, like the discussions with Richard about that, because in my opinion, that is like the most important thing and most important lesson in that movie, in my opinion, but in general about the holiday season. So I'm just curious if you could talk about that line a little bit.
Yeah, of course, we, from a purely structural point of view, we wanted to check in with Santa.
Yeah.
Right. We needed to kind of give the audience a sense that Santa is a bit like an angel of this whole town, of this, what happens in town. And he's observing and seeing what's happening. And so he has an opinion about kids and a compassion to what they feel. And I think there was a moment in the film where, one of these main characters goes through a sort of a process of realization that things are not turning out the way he's hoping, but there's still a glimmer of hope to it. And Santa says this beautiful line that Christmas is a bit like an emotional magnifying glass.
Yes,
I don't think that's a spoiler to say that. And I feel that's very true, because what our movie is about at its core is that family events, whether it's Christmas or Hanukkah or Thanksgiving or lots of different holidays that people celebrate around the world, there's a certain kind of expectation to how things unfold because you've had it every year. So there's a certain expectation to how traditions unfold, and people have opinions about these traditions because to some they feel positive, and to some they're annoying or unnecessary. Or there's a lot of pressure involved in, getting the meal right and serving it right at the right time. That speaks to maybe a parent who's preparing a meal. Or that along with these expectations is also a sense of a ticking clock. There's a timeline. There's a race towards something, and this race inevitably doesn't go the way you expect. Because people have different emotions, some people are in love or think they're in love or fall out of love. Some people feel like, "Ooh, am I going to get the gift that I want?" There's a certain kind of ticking clock to it. And particularly, of course, there is people who live in a happy family and people who don't live in a happy family, or to go to the extreme, people who are alone or feel alone. To them, the holiday season is actually quite emotional in a different way. So we love, both Richard and I love Christmas, and we love that there's a lot of human drama involved, whether it's positive or negative, and there's a lot to be said about that. And the best way to talk about these things is through comedy, I think.
Yes.
Because and I hope this movie allows you hopefully to laugh about yourself.
Yes.
And the family around you and recognize the dynamics in the family, but also, of course, feel the emotion of when things don't go the way you hoped.
Magnifying glass, not microscope. I apologize.
Same idea. Yeah.
Couple more questions too. I do find something you're also talking about is the using humor to kind of guide this kind of self-reflection that a lot of the characters are going through in this film, the older characters and the younger characters, right? There's a lot of kind of figuring things out, finding themselves throughout the holidays. Getting back to what I was saying about that script to screen, I'm just curious what it was like for you from a directorial perspective, kind of showing that journey of self-reflection, because I feel like that's something that's always done from like December 20th to like January 4th, is people kind of figure out this whole, what's this new year going to look like? How was this year? How can I be better? Like that thing. So I'm just wondering from a directorial perspective of that Christmas, the self-reflection component, Simon.
Yeah. I mean, we had lots of conversations about Christmas, and a line that we actually cut from the movie, which is really touching. It didn't quite fit into the sort of progression of the film, was that Santa says something like, if we're lucky, you get to have like 80 or so Christmases. Better make the best of each one of them. And in a way, because a year passes between each of these big events, whether it's your birthday or Christmas or whatever, over time, you have a sense of your own evolution.
Yep.
And in that time, you're actually taken out of work, you're taken out of school, you finally have a moment to reflect. And it's really, I think we're all aware that eventually we're going to sit around the Christmas tree, or around the fire, or whatever, or around the table with everyone who's the closest person in your life. And yeah, we're trying to make it fun, we're trying to have fun, but inevitably some emotional thing is going to happen where you are going to think about someone in your family or yourself. And that just feels really good. And of course, there is a growth journey, particularly with one character, Bernadette, who, there's growth journey with Sam, the anxious twin, who realizes maybe I should be a little bit more like my sister rather than, just worry about the world that I can't control. And Danny, has to learn what it means to sort of deal with a different family dynamic. And I love that those are really true and familiar, and like they feel true to me, these kinds of experiences that I think in some shape or form I have experienced myself. And I like that we always, in these conversations around story, we always refer back to our own experience in some way, and we share how that was. Well, for me it was like this, and for Richard it was like that. For the story team, we have these conversations, because I think that's ultimately what movies making is about. Is not to say, here's the message of the film and you should now learn this lesson. It's, here's what happens. Yep. Does that feel familiar? And as a sort of logic conclusion with the dynamic of characters, this is the outcome of the story. But I think it's for you, the audience, to take away what that means to you, because I think it might mean something different to different people depending on what they're going through.
And I think that's kind of the magical thing about storytelling in general, right? Where there's kind of the different perspectives. And last question before I wrap up. General question, but obviously you could, answer this with your experience with that Christmas. But I find it interesting because at the end of the day, it's all storytelling, whether it's live action, animated. I'm just curious, you directed an incredible animated film for Netflix that's going to drop worldwide very soon, a Christmas film. I'm wondering if you could share something, a fun fact or a misconception about directing an animated film compared to a live action, if you feel like there's a big difference, because I just find that very interesting. You know what I mean? I feel like a lot of people don't talk about that as much. So I'm just wondering, is there anything you could say in regards to directing an animated film?
Yeah, actually, Richard and I have, of course, had this conversation many times, as he's directed many live action films and sat in editorial for many films, and I haven't. I've never directed a live action film, and what we sort of mutually discovered is that, in essence, it's the same thing. It's storytelling. It's making decision of, what costume this person wears, how you direct an actor. A lot of things are similar, but the timeline is jumbled up.
Yeah. So
in animation, you have more time to make decisions, and you have time to go back on your decisions. So it's a little bit less stressful. And Richard says, it's so funny that the most striking thing for him was that how nice everybody is in animation. Totally. And I think it has a lot to do with the fact that in animation, you have to get along over a period of 4 or 5 years.
Yes.
And in live action, you're in this pressure cooker for 3 months when the shoot is happening, when everybody's there, everybody's chiming in, and people are, you're much more exposed to sort of the dynamic of that moment under pressure. And so the reversal, the order change, I think, is probably the biggest difference. And as far as my biggest realization, and I've sort of over the television series and whatnot, I think that the term vision is misconstrued, because
Okay.
a vision is something that yes, you have a sort of core of what you think is right and wrong, which is a lot of it is instinctual, and you have a general idea of where the movie is going, but you have to let the vision develop through the people who work on the film, right? So you have a production designer, a cinematographer, you have actors and character designers, and I think you have to be able to communicate what you're after, but that's not necessarily the vision. The vision is something that you develop over time, and by the time you're really animating, now you should know what your vision of the film is, because you've built it over a certain amount of time. So people don't walk into a script and say, all right, my vision is this and that and this and that. From now on, I will never change it, because that would not allow for all this amazing talent on the film to actually add to the vision.
So well said. And I cannot wait for everyone to watch that Christmas Worldwide on Netflix, because this is just, I had so much fun with it. I watched it again for the third time yesterday as well.
Oh, wow.
So I'm going to continue. No, I know from the first 10 minutes of this film that it's an instant classic that people are going to watch every year. So it's just like that to me, and I'm going to watch it every year. It was an honor and privilege to speak with you. Thank you so much for your time, and happy holidays.
Thank you, Pete. Thanks so much.